Good evening, and thank you for watching. My name is Hank Stephenson. I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor for this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections hosts debates so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Candidates that have a contested primary election have been invited to participate in the debate. Candidates that have opted into the Clean Elections Clean Funding Program are required to participate, while traditional candidates are invited and encouraged to attend. The questions that will be asked this evening are coming directly from voters. Leading up to the debates, Clean Elections conducted outreach to voters across the state, soliciting questions for the candidates. Voters that are watching this debate live, you can submit questions at any time. You can do that via email, debates@kc-a.com, or you can text them in to 928-362-1062, or you can even call them in to 480-937-1297. Please specify if your question is for a specific candidate or all the candidates. We do screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplication, speeches, or personal attacks on candidates. The debate is scheduled for about an hour and a half, so we may not get to all the audience questions, but we will do our best. Candidates, you will have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements and 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to voter questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue between the candidates. If you feel the need to respond to another candidate's comments, you may do so. I may limit responses for time management purposes, and we remind the candidates and the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may vote informed. Tonight's participating candidates are Democrats running for the House of Representatives in Legislative District 2. That includes Senator Andrea Dalessandro, Representative Daniel Hernandez, Mr. Luis Parra, and Billy Peard. And candidates, let's start this off with starting with you, Ms. Dalessandro, your opening statements.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here. This is my 7th election. I love clean elections. I'm running again for the House because I'm a proven and experienced progressive leader. The first issue that caught my attention was the systemic defunding of public education. Currently, I'm the ranking member on the Senate Education Committee, and I have an A+ from the Arizona Education Association and a thumbs up from the School Boards Association to recognize my work. My second issue was environmental, both for water and clean air. And I'm one of 4 legislators who received an A+ from Sierra Club, and I'm also the state lead for the National Caucus of Environmental Educators. In a more general way, I have achieved, my record speaks for itself. I've received 100% on the progressive score, 100% on the Arizona Economic Center, which is about economic equity, and 100% for Who's for Kids and Who's Just Kidding. I'm one of only 8 with perfect attendance, every vote, every day. I've received a secular star because I believe in the separation of church and state. Every year I've been honored by the League of Cities and Towns. I have the experience, I know the ropes, I know the process, I know the players, and I know their motivation. And I'm ready to lead when the Democrats take control of the House. I'm asking for voters to give me one of their 2 votes for Legislative District 2 House. Both independents and Democrats can vote in that election. This woman belongs in the House, and I look forward to serving again in the Arizona House of Representatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Hernandez, you're up.
Thank you, Hank. And thank you to the Citizens Clean Elections Commission for hosting tonight's debate. For the last 4 years, I've had the honor of representing Santa Cruz County and Southeast Pima County at the legislature. I'm honored to serve alongside with Senator Dalessandro and Representative Gabaldon to be able to make sure that Southern Arizona has a voice at the Capitol that is actually proving and getting results for our district, making sure that we are holding up our democratic values. That's why I was proud to be awarded Women's Healthcare Champion in 2019. I was also very thrilled. Sorry, I was muted by the host. Was also thrilled to receive the Barbara Jordan Progressive Leadership Award for my work in 2019, repealing.
Maybe come back to him. Okay, Mr. Parra, technical difficulties. It'll happen.
I was able to work as a part of a coalition and make sure that we drove forward to get $3.6 million for the hospital in Green Valley, the Santa Cruz Valley Regional Hospital, and $1 million for Holy Cross in Nogales. So I am someone who knows how to work at the legislature, get things done, and hold up our democratic values. And that's why I'm asking for folks to vote for me again, to represent them and to keep representing them at the Arizona State Legislature. Thank you, Hank.
Thank you, Representative. Mr. Parra.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to my fellow candidates. I'm not sure if we're going to have to get back to Daniel, but I would think that we will. I mean, I think we've probably heard about a third, maybe 2/3 of what he had to say, but allow me to introduce myself. My name, again, is Luis Parra, and I'm an attorney. I've been practicing law in Southern Arizona for the past 20 years. I'm a veteran, and I'm really interested in becoming a state legislature because I just don't see the results coming in. I'm concerned that after the COVID-19 pandemic, we're going to have a very difficult time getting back on track from the economic development standpoint. And I just don't see the incumbents being interested enough in our economic development to move things forward in Southern Arizona. I know how to work across the spectrum. I've worked with county officials, city officials, state officials, and federal officials. And I'm sure that I'm going to be able to bring my 20-year experience as an attorney to bear in the capital of the state of Arizona. And I'm very familiar with the international issues we're dealing with as well. I've been practicing immigration law as well as cross-border law over the course of the past 20 years. And I'm intimately familiar with a lot of the issues that are being faced from an environmental standpoint in Southern Arizona. The mining concerns that are out there, as well as the water issues that are out there, especially the international wastewater treatment plant issue with the International Outfall Interceptor. I look forward to working with Senator Gabaldon on that particular issue and resolving it once and for all. And again, I would like our Southern Arizona community to get woke and understand that we have to work with our youth in getting things done, as well as our experienced businessmen and women throughout Southern Arizona. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And I look forward to allowing everyone to understand the issues as I see them as we move forward in this campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parra. And Mr. Peard, your turn.
Thank you, Hank. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Billy Peard, for those of you who don't know me. And in recent months, I should say, I've been thinking back on a quote from all of us have our, those politicians who came before us who inspire us. And I've continued looking back at the quote of former Vice President Hubert Humphrey. He said, "The moral test of government is how the government treats those in the dawn of life, those in the twilight of life, and those in the shadows of life." And at no time is that more true and more pressing, more prescient than at this time, these past 3 months. COVID-19 has brought to bear a lot of the inequities, racial inequalities, socioeconomic inequalities, health inequalities that are inherent in our society and specifically in our government. My life and my career has brought about, has exemplified commitment to those values. I grew up here in Southern Arizona. After graduating from law school a number of years ago, I could have gone on to a lucrative career in the law at a private law firm. I chose instead to devote my career to legal aid, where I understood and understand and feel the night terrors, waking up in the middle of the night because one of your clients may be deported the next morning, or may be evicted the next morning, or may lose their food stamps the next week. It's that sense of urgency and devotion and understanding of the law and the community and those who are most at risk that I believe makes me uniquely qualified in this state in this year, where before COVID-19, we were 50th or near 50th on so many indicators of social well-being, whether it be education, water conservation, whether it be taxation and income inequality. So thank you. That's a little bit about myself, and I look forward to getting into the issues.
Thank you. And Representative Hernandez, because we got cut off in the middle there, if you want to take a quick 30 seconds and kind of fill us in on what we missed.
Thanks, Hank. The joys of technology. It's great when it works and terrible when it doesn't. I don't know where exactly I got cut off, so I wanted to make sure that I talked a little bit about my record being one that delivers results for Southern Arizona. Particularly recently, when we had the COVID pandemic start, we had a hospital in Green Valley that I was on the verge of shutting down. I talked to the CEO, and they had enough money to make payroll for 2 weeks. I was able to secure $3.6 million from the state by working with Governor Ducey and other partners, including Senator Dalessandro, but making sure that this important resource wasn't taken away during the middle of a pandemic. Also, securing $1.1 million for Holy Cross in Nogales to make sure that the people of Santa Cruz County had a hospital that was ready and available for them. I'm someone who has proven that they can work together with all people to get stuff done for Southern Arizona, and particularly for LD2. I have fought for some of the hardest issues in my career, both professionally and now as a legislator: guns, gays, and abortion. Fighting and making sure that at the Capitol, I'm holding up our democratic values and making sure that we're stopping bad bills from moving forward. But now that we're on the verge of taking the majority, it's not enough to just stop bad bills from not going anywhere, but now we need to keep fighting for the good bills. And that's what I did last year when I repealed No Promo Homo, a big win for the LGBTQ community and for all Arizona's education advocates who were barred from talking about the LGBTQ community for 29 years. So that's the record that I'm bringing into this race, and I hope to earn people's vote for a third term at the Arizona legislature.
Okay, thank you. Let's jump right into it. Considering we're conducting this debate via Zoom, let's talk COVID. I think the most pressing question is, Governor Doug Ducey allowed his extended stay-at-home order to expire on May 16th. Do you agree with this decision? Why or why not? And if you don't agree, what should the governor have done differently? And please be specific. Let's start with Mr. Peard.
Thank you, Hank. I did agree with the governor in his initial decision to order stay at home. I think it was a little bit late, in my opinion. He acted a bit slower than other governors, both Republicans and Democrats in other states, on making that decision. For example, Ohio governor issued his stay-at-home, Republican governor issued his stay-at-home order long before Governor Ducey. Nevertheless, I disagreed with his decision this past week and a half, 2 weeks, to lift most of those restrictions. In many states, we're hearing that they have phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of reopening. And it appears that Governor Ducey doesn't have the nuance capability of phases. He just has an on switch and off switch. Wrong approach. We're going to see the scientists, the fact-based folks are telling us that we're going to see the negative consequences of this in a few weeks or a few months. I'm sure many of the audience have seen the photos, even in our district, in Nogales, for example. There was a photo circulated of the Ross clothing store in Nogales, Arizona, a few days ago, of a line wrapping around the store with no social distancing. There's photos of bars and nightclubs in Phoenix area and elsewhere. we know that this is the wrong decision, and it's not my opinion exclusively. If you look to the polls in various states, including here in Arizona, those governors of both political parties, regardless of the political persuasion of the state itself, the governors that have been the most strict and the most forthright and honest with their people about the need to close down have been rewarded with high poll numbers, including Republican governors in blue states and Democratic governors in red states like Kentucky, for example. So I give the governor maybe at best a C on this topic.
Mr. Parra?
Thank you. I did agree with him with his decision to with the orders, the executive orders that he issued with respect to having businesses closed down. I thought it was the right thing. Obviously, there were so many health experts at the time that were advising that we do that. I did not agree with his most recent decision, though. I thought it was not based on, again, the decision by health experts. I think he was just taking the cue from President Donald Trump on the matter, as he's done with a lot of things throughout his term. And what I definitely did not agree with is the lack of transparency that came from the governor's administration. And I would expect that from here on in, these decisions that are made with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic are made based on health experts' opinion on matters relating to COVID-19. I think, as an example, when that doesn't happen, we end up having some serious concerns. You take, for example, Southern Arizona. I think Southern Arizona, our district, has taken the brunt of these orders that have come from the Ducey administration that have not been transparent enough for us to really consider, and for the folks residing in Southern Arizona to be able to protect themselves and know that they have to stay home. And so, having said that, again, I agree with certain decisions that have been made. I do not agree with the transparency that has been lacking from Governor Ducey.
Representative Hernandez?
Thanks, Hank. I think one of the important things to actually talk about is the fact that Southern Arizona, particularly Santa Cruz County, has some of the lowest testing availability in the entire state. So that's why this week I worked, and following up on stuff that Senator Dalessandro had already been working on, secured an additional 500 tests for Santa Cruz County to be able to expand the testing. Because what we're seeing is in Santa Cruz County, they're so limited on the amount of tests that they can conduct that they're not actually testing folks who aren't basically already positive. So we're seeing an abnormally high infection rate in Santa Cruz County. To your question about did I agree with Governor Ducey, I didn't agree with Governor Ducey about either the start or the end of the stay-at-home order. But I did agree with Senator Kyrsten Sinema. She had been calling for shutting this down. She went as far as going on Twitter and said, Governor, shut down, keep folks at home. We need a stay-at-home order. And I agreed with her then, and I agree with her now. It is still too early to be doing this. We are having folks go out and expose themselves and others unnecessarily. We still don't have enough testing available. Getting the 500 tests for Santa Cruz County was a challenge because we still don't have the capacity to do expanded testing, and let alone contact tracing. I used to work in healthcare. I started out as a nursing assistant, as a phlebotomist at a hospital in Tucson, at Tucson Medical Center. I know how difficult it is to contain an infection when someone comes in with something that is airborne, something that's droplet based. So I know firsthand how difficult it is and why it's vital for folks to stay at home. That's why I've been doing the most that I can to stay at home, short of going down to Rio Rico to help out with fresh produce distribution, where I saw Mr. Parra once, and down to the legislature. I've been staying at home almost all the time, wearing my face mask. Great to have my new Vote Hernandez face mask. But Governor Ducey, I think, lifted the order too soon because he was listening to the politics of the situation. And what we need to do is look at the data. And the data has not shown that we have flattened our curve sufficiently. Dr. Kara Chris, the director of health at the state of Arizona, when she was asked at a press conference when they were announcing the lifting of the order, said we didn't know if we'd hit our peak. But what we also need to do is we need to realize that we need to help those who are the most hurt by this. Santa Cruz County and Nogales particularly are being disproportionately affected. But that's why I've been working with the Fresh Produce Association to make sure that we are keeping that cross-border trade, to keep fresh produce coming into the United States, but also to make sure that we have those jobs. But now we're seeing infections happening at some of the warehouses where the fresh produce is coming in. So that's where we need to increase testing. We need to increase whatever we can to make sure that our hospitals have the resources. When I talked to Debbie down at Holy Cross, the CEO, she ended up using the $1 million that we gave her right away just to be able to convert some of their facilities to make sure that they had reverse airflow rooms. So we know that it's not enough to just say, keep the state shut down, but we need to find ways to take care of those folks and make sure that they have what they need. So that means food on the table, making sure we increase the unemployment insurance from the low that it is at $240 a week, and making sure that we're taking care of the people that live in our communities. So no, I don't agree with Governor Ducey and his decision to lift the stay-at-home order prematurely and potentially causing more infections in my district and across the state of Arizona.
And Senator Dalessandro, what specifically should he have done differently?
Well, one thing that I've been fighting for the last several weeks is to have a COVID testing site in Santa Cruz County and also in Green Valley, which is mostly a senior population, and a lot of people are unwilling to go up to Tucson to get tested. So I have been working both with Senator Kristen Sinema's office and with several corporations who have federal contracts. Their labs have federal contracts with Walmart and Walgreens. And I have asked them to expand their testing area. I asked for Senator Sinema's help because they have a federal contract with HHS, and there's a snafu. But I stressed that not every home has 2 cars. If someone's going to work and someone is at home, they don't have the luxury. The testing hours are limited, and we're really working hard to get that done. And in 2018, because of working with Mariposa Health community health centers, I was honored as the Legislator of the Year for community health. We have several in Legislative District 2, including Marana and El Rio and community in the Green Valley, Sahuarita area. And it was because of my close connection with Mariposa, they nominated me. So I'm very proud of that. I think that Governor Ducey opened it too soon without a plan. And I think it's important to realize that Arizona is so diverse in landscape and in the number of people in an area. And I believe that we are still in the first wave. And I think it was ill-conceived because there was an implication that things are safe, and that is not true. So my message to everyone is, if you can, please stay home as much as possible. Wear disposable gloves at least, and wear a mask when you go out, because this is really a deadly pandemic, and I want everybody to be safe and healthy.
And can I add?
Jump right in.
Thank you. Again, my main point in answering your question was that there was a lack of transparency coming from the Ducey administration. I can't stress that enough. In Southern Arizona, we have many Hispanic-speaking adults and senior adults that just are not understanding the message that is coming from the Ducey administration. And I would hope that whatever is done from here on in, there is a bilingual message going out to folks in Southern Arizona. We need it. And if we're going to fight this, we need to have transparency. I can't stress that enough. Thank you.
Perhaps you should follow me on Facebook. I have shared it in Spanish too.
All right, so since all of you agree that the shutdown has been lifted too quickly, What do you say to business owners, especially small business owners in legislative district 2, who say that if this continues, that they will not be able to reopen, and who believe that they will be able to, that they can reopen responsibly, that they can enforce social distancing, and at least keep people coming in the doors to keep their businesses open? And let's go in reverse order. Let's just start with Senator Dalessandro.
Sure. The way to get the businesses open is for the employers to develop standards for cleanliness, for disinfecting, for wearing masks. I applaud Costco, which is in the northern part of our district, for their admitting customers only with the mask on. That's a simple thing to do, because not only are you protecting yourself, but you're protecting others. So I would just say strict adherence to disinfecting, to have people wear masks. That's the way back for the economic revival of our small businesses. And I also encourage, the Senate caucus has been working diligently, helping people both get their unemployment, because that was a disaster, because the information technology system that we used is from the 1980s, and we're also helping small businesses get the federal and state entitlements that they're due, the assistance that they're due, because many businesses that were non-essential were closed for 2 or 3 weeks, and it cost tens of thousands of dollars. So please email me at the office at dalessandro@easyleg.com. Let me know if we can help you.
Okay, we're having some trouble hearing you, Senator. Let's move on to Representative Hernandez. What do you say to business owners in your district who think they can reopen safely, and whose businesses will go under if they don't reopen soon?
The first thing that I tell folks that I talk to, and I talk to folks fairly regularly, I was just talking to Gary Elam, who runs Elgin Distillery, a couple weeks ago. Everyone has had their life impacted and affected differently by COVID-19. So seeing the need, he changed his business to start producing hand sanitizer down in Elgin. So we're seeing people having to adjust. We're seeing restaurants move to takeout only. So the first thing is, we need to realize that we need to live in a different world than we did 6 months ago. So I want to be a partner for folks. That's why I've been working directly with business owners who are applying for the Paycheck Protection Program, making sure that I'm following up directly with banks to follow up on applications. You know, there are organizations, nonprofits, that are going to go under if they don't get increased funding, because fundraising has almost died out for many of these organizations that rely on donors. So I've been working directly with these business owners. But the second thing I've told folks is, when you reopen, we need to make sure that you are taking care of your workers, because you are only able to be successful if you take care of your workers and your patrons. So that has meant talking to folks about where they can get things like hand sanitizer, having them be connected to organizations and groups that will go into your business and show you how to open responsibly and how to adjust your business practices to be able to deal with the fact that we have an airborne virus that is impacting and hurting so many people in our community. So I agree with folks. We need to reopen up, but we need to do it in a different way than we did 6 months ago. So we can't just have people going into a grocery store without wearing a face mask, without personal protective equipment. But when we are folks who have the ability to stay at home, we need to do that. It is a privilege to stay at home, because there are too many Arizonans and people in our district, particularly in Santa Cruz County, where the average income is $29,000, who, if they don't work, they don't feed their families. And it's not just those who are, low income. It's those who have kids that they can't send to school because they've been closed for a couple of months. They can't go to work because their kids are at home and they can't leave them on their own. So we need to reopen, but reopening means that we do it responsibly, doing things like installing plexiglass dividers at restaurants, doing things like making sure that all of your employees have face masks. I've had volunteers that have offered to make face masks for different businesses and connecting them so that they get enough of them for themselves and for their businesses and for their employees. But if we're not taking care of the workers and the patrons, then you don't have a business to reopen. And I think that's the big thing. And a lot of business owners are understanding, and they realize that if we reopen too soon, we're going to have to shut back down if there's a second wave. So I think people are understanding and responsible, but we need to do a better job as a state of ensuring that they'll have access to things like face coverings, like hand sanitizer, because for a long time, these were in short supply. So I'm constantly working with folks, and if anybody wants to reach out, they can email me at dhernandez@azleg.gov, whether it's following up with a bank about a paycheck protection program loan, or making sure that we're connecting you if you're a worker who's been unemployed and hasn't been able to get through to the right folks to get you the results that you need. Thanks, Hank.
Thank you. And Mr. Parra, what do you say to those business owners in your district who think that the governor made the right call in lifting that order and that they can go back and enforce public health guidelines responsibly?
My direct response to them would be, let's get to work. Let's do it with common sense, and let's do it with a common purpose. Common sense, common ground, common purpose. That's what I would stress to them. As a fellow business owner, I know what they're going through. I am a recipient of a PPP loan, and I know I'm going to have to pay it back, but I'm going to have to maintain my payroll record straight so that I can then have that PPP forgiven. So I would tell them, make sure and do that first and foremost. But have common sense with respect to how you're going to go about opening your business. I'm taking all the health concerns seriously with my employees as well as my clients here at my small law firm in Nogales, Arizona. I've been practicing law here for 10 years in my own practice. After the government experience, I decided to open up my own practice, and it was tough at first. I started my practice back in 2009, right after the recession hit. And I feel I'm going to have to do the same thing here as we're going to start the post-COVID-19 situation. So I would ask my fellow business owners throughout Southern Arizona, just hang in there. Things are going to get better. I know that when I opened up my practice in 2009, I had to be very, very optimistic about things, and I continue to be optimistic as to where Southern Arizona can go from an economic development standpoint. So just have a common purpose as well, and that purpose being open up safely, and but stay positive that your cash flows will begin to come in, and you're going to be just fine. And again, with that. Opening up your businesses, obviously
through the 2008-2009 recession and the aftermath, slow build from recession. What I saw, like many of you, I think, is that even despite a Democrat in the White House, even despite during much of that rebuilding time, Democratic control of the House and the Senate in Washington, we saw the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And nowhere is that more visible than in small businesses throughout Arizona and in District 2. It's no surprise, it should be no surprise to those viewing, that in the aftermath of any kind of recession, whether it be brought on by, like it did in 08-09 from the housing bubble, or today as a result of an unexpected health crisis, when we rebuild from recessions, it's typically the larger corporations that are better able to weather the storm. And it's the smaller family-owned businesses that we're talking about here that are less well-equipped to weather the storm. It's the job of government at the state level and the federal level to ensure that there's a level playing field for the local businesses. One of my opponents, for example, Representative Hernandez, has received many donations, for example, from Walmart and from the owners of Walmart over the years. And I have to believe that Walmart does not give donations to political candidates because they feel in the giving mood. There's something in return they're expecting. And so when we talk about advocating for local businesses, let's talk about what state government can do. The PPP program, as far as it's been rolled out, it's been a mixed review. It's a good program. It's an important program. Most of that money has gone to the wealthy, large corporations, but some of it, as Luis pointed out, has trickled down to the smaller businesses. But that's not the end all. We are running for state legislature. We will have control and authority, not over Washington, if elected. We will have control and authority over the state budget. For example, there's a thing called the Rainy Day Fund, which at the beginning of COVID-19 stood at roughly $1 billion. And Governor Ducey was very proud of touting how he had built it up from roughly 500 million during his tenure. Well, if there's ever a rainy day, this is it. This is the rainy day. And what has our existing legislature done during the past 2.5 months? They've appropriated all of 10% of the rainy day fund. We need to exhaust that rainy day fund and then some. And we can talk later. I'm sure there'll be more questions about how each of us proposes to raise revenue and cut where we need to cut.
That's the very next one.
Hey, before we move on,
Hernandez, go ahead.
Thank you. You know, one of my opponents questioned my integrity and my decision-making because of a donation that I've received. Over the last 9 years that I've been an elected official, I've been proud to receive over 2,000 donations, ranging from $5 from a teacher that's all they could afford because they believed in me and my vision. But I've been able to build coalitions. That's what I do. Being a gay Latino who was the youngest state legislator when I was in 2017 in my first term, I don't come with a lot of power. I build coalitions and I get stuff done. So for me, I'm proud to have support of folks all over the state. And I've never made a decision based off of a contribution. And to insinuate that I would do anything other than that, I think is just a cheap shot that people don't really care about. The big thing is, what are the results that I've been providing to the people that live in Southern Arizona? That's why I've been endorsed by groups like the Teamsters, which just endorsed me last Friday, because I support unions, I support our workers, but I also make sure that I'm working across party lines to deliver results. Last year in the budget, I got $20 million for school counselors and counselors and also school resource officers. So I'm someone that builds coalitions. I'm someone that gets stuff done, but I help elect Democrats and get other Democrats into positions where we can make decisions. In 2018, I was the political director for Swing Left. So if the accusation is that I'm helping just big businesses, you know, I went into 2018 helping out over 30 congressional campaigns to retake the U.S. House of Representatives. I went up to LD17 to help out Jennifer Pollock become the first Democrat to represent the Chandler area in 40 years. And I've also worked to elect folks like Domingo de Grazia, Charlene Fernandez, and other strong progressives at the Capitol. So for me, I build coalitions and I work to make sure that I'm working as many times as possible, as much as possible with everyone to get stuff done for LD2.
Right. And thank you. And I would just like to add that there are rules in the legislature. And in order to introduce a bill, it has to be heard over 3 days. We adjourn sine die to finish the regular session. And if anyone followed Senator Phan's words and what the governor is saying, that we will be back for a special session, hopefully when it's safer at the Capitol. But we couldn't do those things now. They will be addressed in the special session. There are just rumors that it might be mid-June, but it's not in my control. So we will be going back and addressing the issues that were raised.
And one of the big issues that y'all will have to address is the budget. Budget analysts predict that Arizona will face a $1 billion deficit because of the economic fallout of the COVID-19 lockdown. How do you each propose to solve this deficit? And I want you to be very specific. If you're proposing cutting programs, which programs? If you're proposing raising taxes, which taxes and by how much? And let's start with the senator.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, it is very, very difficult, and I'd say impossible with the current legislature to raise taxes or to decrease a tax credit or a deduction because of a citizens initiative from, I think, 2004 that requires a 2/3 majority. So that is out. What I'm pushing for is federal help to the state government to cover some of these costs. One thing that I will not tolerate is cuts to public education. One good part of the CARES Act is that money will be coming to schools. Many of the schools in our district, Title I schools, which generally have students at the lower economic rungs. Governor Ducey also has control of about $56 million, and I'm encouraging him to spend the money on broadband, and to assist special education students around the state. One of the serious provisions in the CARES Act is that you're prohibited from cutting funds to public education. So that, and I took it out of behind, that's usually behind me in other Zoom things I do, but I'm also gathering signatures for Invest in Ed 2, which will bring a lot of money into our classrooms for staff, for support staff, the teachers academy. So those are how we're gonna find extra money.
Mr.
Hank, thank you.
Yeah.
First of all, I'd like to just briefly state that I agree with Billy with respect to the PPP just not cutting it, and I also believe that the Arizona Safe, the rainy day fund needs to be breached. It seems like the incumbents in this race haven't answered the question that was posed out there by Mr. Peard with respect to the rainy day fund, and I would like to know what their point of view is on it. We are going to have to dip into the rainy day fund, and it seems like the current legislators representing us up there just haven't really brought that to bear with the Ducey administration. I would also like to say, and I want to answer your question with respect to budget talk. And I want to say that those tax credits that are out there, there's no accountability underlying those tax credits. And quite frankly, I don't think the incumbents in this race have done a good job in trying to assert that there's a lack of accountability with respect to those tax credits. So that's one thing I would certainly work on, and I will work on when I'm a legislator. And all this talk about, oh, we don't have a majority, so we can't do anything left or right. Well, you know, you need to reach across the table and build some consensus. That's what legislators are supposed to do, but they have to do it in a firm manner. And again, I don't believe that's been done, and that's one of the reasons I'm running. And I'm hoping to get up there, and whether we have a majority or not, we're gonna be firm. I'm gonna be firm, and I'm sure as heck, as soon as I get in there, if we're still in the same position where we are right now, and I'm sure that it's going to be a tough situation. Again, that's one of the reasons I'm running. We're going to have to dip into that rainy day fund.
I think the representative wanted to respond.
Yeah, I'll respond to one of the accusations that's been made, that we haven't been able to deliver results and get stuff done by working across the aisle. I think one of the problems that I have as an incumbent is I try and find whatever I can agree with my colleagues on the Republican side. And I'll send a list to Mr. Parra because it seems like he likes to ask questions that have already been out there for a long time. You know, one of the things that we just passed in the last couple of days was expanded broadband with our co-ops. So I know his broadband has had issues because we've been on calls with Mr. Parra where he hasn't been able to connect. So making sure that Santa Cruz County and rural parts of our state have expanded broadband. I was one of the co-sponsors of that legislation. I've been working for years across the aisle. That's why, again, last year I got $20 million in the budget to make sure that we could have increased counselors, social workers in our schools. But to your specific question, what are we going to do and how are we going to fund it? One, we need to make sure that we modernize Prop 301. It's been long overdue, and because of politics at the Capitol, we didn't even put it on the ballot this year. It needs to be increased to a full penny so that we make sure that we have TRIF funding for the universities to make sure that they're able to do the innovation and the work that they've done to make sure that we are leaders at the University of Arizona with COVID testing and antibody research. Also, we need to make sure that we really take a hard look at multiple ways of raising revenue. Like Senator Dalessandro mentioned, it's almost impossible to raise it at the legislature, and that's why we have to go to the ballot box. That's why I'm going to be at Nichols Diner in Rio Rico this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. collecting signatures for Invest in Ed. If anybody wants to stop by, I will give you your pen that you get to keep. But we need to raise revenue by making sure that we modernize Prop 301. There are some tax credits that make sense, the angel investor tax credit and the research and development tax credit. I worked and negotiated directly with some of these big businesses to make sure that there was accountability and to make sure that they were guaranteeing high quality, high paying jobs. But that's not enough. We need to do more to make sure that all of the tax credits that are on the books are reviewed periodically. It is appalling that in 5 years, the committee that's supposed to review tax credits had not met until this last year. So I want to make sure that I'm fighting. And even though I've been in the minority, I keep getting results for our district. So for me, I want to make sure we raise revenue by modernizing Prop 301, pass Invest in Ed, but also making sure that we're doing everything we can to look at some of these loopholes, because there are over 300 exemptions, many of which don't make sense in 2020, but they did 20 years ago.
What he means by modernizing Prop 301, can he explain what that? I don't think most viewers know what Prop 301 is, but also I don't understand what he means by quote unquote.
There are a lot of things you don't understand. So modernizing Prop 301 means that we increase it to a full penny. And that's been something that education advocates have been fighting for a long time. So
if I could, the Proposition 301 is a 0.6 cent sales tax that's directed towards education. Generally, when people speak of modernizing it, it's raising it to a full penny, which is something the legislature has toyed with but not done.
Right. And we extended it last year in a bipartisan manner, but it's not voter protected. And what we've seen time and time again is that unless it's voter protected, it gets tinkered with at the Capitol, and it usually increases the need for the folks to come out and do initiatives like Invest in Ed.
Okay. And I want to give Mr. Peard a chance to chime in. What is your solution for the state's budget woes? Presumably it's some sort of a tax increase, but give us specifics.
Thank you, Hank. And I think this is a prime example of where there's true choice among Democrats. Mr. Hernandez made a point a few comments ago about how he has been out there supporting other Democrats, how he's a Democrat. We're all Democrats. That's why we're here tonight. That's why all the viewers presumably are watching tonight. But there are differences among Democrats. So this is a prime example. If I understand correctly, Mr. Hernandez supports, quote unquote, modernizing the sales tax from 5.6% to raise it up to 6% to give education a full 1% sales tax. I disagree with that approach. I presume, I don't want to presume what his motivations are. I'll let him speak to that in a moment. But I do not support sales tax increases as a matter of course. I do support, of course, increased education funding and other types of funding. As most viewers understand, sales taxes are regressive, meaning that if you're a family earning $10,000 a year, as is not uncommon in LD2, or if you're a family earning $100,000 a year, you pay the same 5.6% sales tax on your roll of toilet paper or on your 5 cases of toilet paper, as may be the case recently. And in contrast, this is where we differ. I support getting rid of the tax loopholes, tax exemptions, tax credits, tax deductions that have been created over the past 20 years since I was growing up here for large corporations and for special corporate interests. Almost every single legislative session since 1992, when I was 7 years old growing up here, the legislature has found a way to carve out more income tax exemptions for the wealthy and more income tax exemptions for corporations. It's interesting and it's troubling when Representative Hernandez, as a Democrat, seems to come out on the same side of an issue, along with someone like Sylvia Allen, out of one of the more conservative state legislators in the eastern part of the state, who finally herself has come around to increasing sales tax for education purposes. When the Republicans and our Democratic colleagues agree on how to raise the taxes, that seems to be a red flag in my mind. Let's increase taxes on the wealthy. Let's increase taxes on special corporate interests. For example, I'll give you one concrete example. The mining industry. The mining industry has a free pass on many categories of sales tax. So when they buy equipment or machinery or tractors for use on their mines, they don't pay sales tax in the state of Arizona. But if a small business on Morley Avenue in Nogales has to buy a piece of equipment to keep their restaurant operating, sure as heck, they're going to pay 5.6% on that piece of equipment because they don't have powerful friends in the legislature. So a couple points, how to close the $1 billion gap. Roll back some of the tax credits, for example, the mining. For example, 2 years ago, the legislature created a sales tax exemption for private jets. I don't suspect that many of the viewers tonight watching are in the market for a private jet even before COVID-19. Let's roll that back. That's $5 million a year, just that provision alone. I generally do not support cutting government services, but there's one state government agency where I do support cutting, especially during the era of COVID-19, and that's the Department of Corrections, which constitutes almost 10% of the state general budget, the state general fund, and is incarcerating way too many people. We can do better. We can tie together our criminal justice reform agenda together with our COVID-19 budget shortfall agenda and have a holistic approach to this. And I've probably spoken too long, so I'll cede my time to.
Hey,
You know, I just want to reiterate, can't get rid of the tax credit or a tax deduction or increased tax without a 2/3 majority. That is the fact, that is the law that we have to deal with. What I suggest is that we bring that initiative to the people of Arizona in a citizens initiative and get it to be a simple majority. Because what we faced in the 8 years I've served in the House and the Senate in Phoenix is that it takes a simple majority to cut a tax, and it takes 2/3 to increase it or decrease a tax credit or a deduction. Please don't make me say it again. That's the fact of life that we deal with. That's the fact.
Hey, Hank, I want to jump in here too, because I was just compared to Sylvia Allen. You know, even a broken clock is right twice a day. So this is the one thing that I seem to agree with Senator Allen. But the funny thing about the education chair, Sylvia Allen, is I'm her worst nightmare. I have outmaneuvered her twice on 2 important pieces of legislation. Last year, I built a coalition to repeal no promo homo, which I mentioned at the beginning of this call. She did not want us to use her bill. We got enough pressure to have her bill be used as a vehicle, even though she voted against that. And this year, she introduced a terrible sex education bill. I introduced the counter that I worked on with Planned Parenthood to sponsor. And not only did her bill not go anywhere, didn't even get assigned to committee, because I outmaneuvered her and made sure that her terrible ideas for Arizona aren't moving forward. So, you know, she was right on modernizing Prop 301, because the money from 301 goes directly into teachers' pockets. It's used to make sure that we're giving teachers bonuses. As a school board member, I know how important those buckets of money are. But also in Southern Arizona, the University of Arizona relies on funding from Prop 301, particularly our TRIF, to make sure that we're doing what we can to provide that funding. So I just wanted to respond to that.
Speaking of Sylvia Allen, one of her signature issues is the Empowerment Scholarship Account, basically vouchers for students to attend private schools. I want to ask each of you, do you support expanding the Empowerment Scholarship Account program to this year? We've expanded it to include students on the Navajo Nation who attend a private school in New Mexico. So one, this is a 3-part question. 1, do you support that expansion? 2, do you support any other expansion? 3, do you support repealing the program outright? And let's start with Mr. Peard.
I'm going to do something most politicians are not accustomed to doing, give you a straight answer. I do not support the expansion. I do unequivocally support the repeal of the ESA program in its entirety. It's regressive. It guts our public school system, as Senator Dalessandro knows, as having a career in public education in New Jersey. It favors predominantly wealthy families who frankly would have likely already paid the private or would have been willing to pay the private tuition regardless of any kind of tax incentive. Government tax incentives, in my view, should only be used to incentivize desirable behavior from folks in the community who would not have otherwise done the thing we're trying to. An ESA is an example of the inverse of that, where we're doubly incentivizing something that 90% of the participants or enrollees would have already done because they have the financial wherewithal to do it. And it's the proposed expansion on the Navajo Nation is a rare exception to that general principle, but that does not change my fierce opposition to ESAs and to other forms of shifting government resources to wealthy families so that they can educate their children in a school of their choice. I support school choice. I support families having the ability to send their children to private schools, parochial schools, religious schools, but not on the government dime.
Thank you. Mr. Parra, 3 parts. Expansion in general, this specific expansion, and kill the program.
I got you, Hank. Thank you. Let me start off by saying that I also support school choice. My 21-year-old son, he benefited from school choice, and I'll tell you in what way. He attended University High School, just a great high school in Southern Arizona that he was able to graduate from, and then went on and got himself a full ride to attend a private school out of state. And I'm really proud of him. He just graduated a couple of weeks ago, and now he's back home helping me out in my campaign. So kudos to my son Alan out there if he's watching. And I want to say, though, that to answer the question, I am against it. We shouldn't have any expansion of it, and we should repeal it. I think that if folks can afford private schools, have them pay for it themselves. And if they want them to go to a high school that it relates with their child because they're gifted in some manner or another, have them attend University High School. Thank you.
And to the senator, I didn't check, but I'm betting you voted against the expansion this year. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Every year. And as the ranking member of Senate Education, I can recall some of my speech. First of all, in the audience, and before I start that, I would just like to say that the challengers are confusing 2 different programs. One is the school tuition organization, which is drains money. There are only 2 private schools in Santa Cruz County, and there are no other private schools in the Pima part of Legislative District 2, but we do see people getting up to $45,000 for tuition to a private school. And the deal is, in November, people go and say, oh, can you help me out? You know, can you donate $1,000 if it's a couple to help me pay my son or daughter's tuition? So that's the school tuition
organization.
Right, but
we're talking about ESAs.
Question that was asked about ESA, the Empowerment Scholarship Account. And the issue, under the previous superintendent of school, they allowed about 10 Navajo children to go to a Christian school in New Mexico. Because of the boundaries of the reservation, it wasn't known. Then it became known that it was out of state. So at the committee, there were several national organizations. And what I said was, I'm against this. It's not just about these children. It's a slippery slope that there will be private schools in California, in Utah, and Colorado, and New Mexico going after Arizona tax dollars, which is not a good thing. I can remember standing up when they did the expansion. I also circulated Save Our Schools petitions because it is the wrong way to go. I think the money should be funneled into our public schools to offer more services and better outcomes to our public schools. And I also believe in school choice, but I don't believe on the taxpayer dime.
So considering that, should we kill off the program entirely? Should we repeal the program?
I have to tell you, there could possibly be some validity for a few programs for severely disabled students that difficult to serve in our traditional public schools, but we should actually fund, their parents and help them out, because some of the severely special needs students need, extra help. Many of our school districts help people with moderate or slight problems, but if it's severe, it's difficult sometimes, depending on the school size and the location and the availability of staff to give the students the services and support that they and their families need.
Okay. Don't expand it. Don't quite kill it. Representative Hernandez?
Thank you, Hank. I've been a vocal opponent of ESA expansion since my first term at the legislature, when we had the big expansion that was repealed when voters struck it down a couple of years ago. I was so opposed to it that when we were in a 35-25 split and had no real power as Democrats to stop the bill from moving forward, help lead a walkout of my Democratic colleagues to slow down the process, to give teachers an opportunity to come and join us in the gallery, so that when this happened, there was people who were educators that were going to be negatively impacted in the gallery looking down at the legislature. And that's why I think in my second term, we came back 31-29, because educators saw the fundamental dismantling of public education at the legislature, the underfunding that's happened for years. So when we voted for it, when the legislature voted for it, I voted against it. Every time expansion has been on the table, I've been a no vote, and I've been a vocal opponent to the expansion of ESAs. I think that the entire program is not one that we need to be expanding, but there are very limited cases with disabled students that I think that Senator Dalessandro talked about. So it's not a simple decision of just cut everybody off, because there are many students with severe disabilities who I have talked to, even in our own district, who have tried going to district schools who just don't have the ability to take care of their children. So giving them the flexibility, I think, made sense. The original intent of the program was one that I think, had we not expanded it and done what we've done now, which is allow people to go out of state with our state dollars and have no accountability, is wrong. So the last thing that I'll say on this is, when this has been on the table, I have stood up and voted against it, but I've also talked about it vocally because I was a school board member where we saw corruption and nepotism. My very first time in office at the Sunnyside Unified School District Governing Board, I had to recall 2 of my fellow board members because there was nepotism and corruption there. So I've been fighting against corruption and nepotism. I've been fighting against misspending of education dollars. And that's what I think is happening right now when we expand the ESA program. We need to put more money into charter and traditional district schools, because at every level, every child in the state of Arizona deserves to have a great education. And we've been underfunding those schools and not giving our students the ability to be successful.
I want to move on to a different topic. We've got some questions from the audience, including one about undocumented immigrants. It says, none of these tax-paying workers are eligible for the federal stimulus CARES funds or unemployment benefits. California has created one-time state-funded assistance relief fund for such workers. Should Arizona do the same thing or something similar? Why or why not? And let's start with Peard.
The short answer is yes, unequivocally. The state of Arizona should create a fund. This is a topic close to my heart. I've spent most of my career as an attorney representing undocumented immigrants, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, working for legal aid. I have supported multiple programs to reduce the incidence of families being broken apart unnecessarily, especially during the last several years of the Trump administration here in Southern Arizona, when I worked for the ACLU as the point person for the ACLU in Southern Arizona. And many viewers know me as someone who worked passionately on Proposition 205, which was commonly known as the Sanctuary Initiative here in Tucson, which was not successful electorally, but was intended and drafted as a way to minimize the pain and suffering of otherwise law-abiding families who are at risk of deportation and have been torn apart. We should absolutely change the law so that there's a way or create a new fund rather, so that there's a way for undocumented families who are residents of Arizona, so that although they may not be citizens of the United States, they do reside in Arizona. They pay taxes in Arizona, both federal taxes and state taxes, sales taxes. They should be able to benefit from some type of economic support during COVID-19, whether that be in the form of a parallel program to unemployment benefits. We know that unemployment benefits are not available at the moment to workers who are undocumented. We have a system for this. For those who might be thinking at home, how are you going to track it? How are you going to, where's the accountability? Folks are undocumented. There's already a system that's been in place for more than 20 years. It's called the ITIN system, the Individual Tax Identification Number, which is a number similar to a social security number that is issued to folks who are undocumented who work in the United States and who file their annual tax returns. So there is a way for undocumented families to, in fact, file the tax times. That system could be used in a parallel fashion under state government to administer programs like this. And, again, I don't want this to be a Billy picks on Representative Hernandez night, but Representative Hernandez does have a voting. He may take issue with my picking apart who donates to him, but a voting record speaks for itself. In 2019, just to give one example, in the Public Safety Committee on which he serves, he voted. He was one of the only Democrats to vote with all Republicans on what I term a school to prison pipeline bill, a bill that essentially exacerbates or expands upon the degree to which employees are required under state law to report things to police. Now, when that happens, when 16-year-olds or 15-year-olds are reported to the police, they are fed, if they're undocumented, as many of them are in Mr. Hernandez's home area of Sunnyside School District, they are fed into the deportation pipeline if they are undocumented, even if they're dreamers, even if they have what is kind of a quasi-immigration status under the DREAM program, under the DACA program. Those individuals, those students, will nevertheless be fed into the criminal justice system, and as a result of being fed into the criminal justice system, will be fed into the deportation pipeline with the federal government. I oppose that. I would be interested in Mr. Hernandez's response on why he voted the way he did on that particular bill. But anyway, that's my approach to the undocumented community.
Okay, I think we're getting a little off topic with that one. Representative, do you want to address it now, or do you want to circle back in your answer?
I'll respond, and then I'll wait for everybody else so I can give my answer on the original question.
Quickly, if you could.
Yeah, so I think intentions are different than actions, and I think this is the problem with my opponents. They're trying to cherry pick out of the thousands of votes that I've made at the legislature, but my record does speak for itself. I served on the Sunnyside School Board, where I worked to make sure that ICE could not come onto our campuses and made sure that we put a moratorium on out-of-school suspensions. I don't know how many of the folks watching at home know this. My sister Alma was attacked by a police officer who was poorly trained. She was hurt and she had 5 herniated discs as a result of that injury. So when I got elected to the Sunnyside School Board, I redid our entire behavior matrix so that no student was being put out of school without making sure that we exhausted every other option. I started an alternative suspension program to make sure that we were taking care of the kids in Sunnyside. When it comes to advocating for the Latino community and those that are undocumented, I've been fighting for comprehensive immigration reform since I was old enough to vote. Going back to 2008, I have been a vocal proponent of comprehensive immigration reform. And the big thing, going back to the insinuation for Mr. Peard, is that I'm helping lead to deportation of children. That is a patent falsehood. And this is the problem with my opponents. They're spending more time attacking me than they are answering these questions. And I think the big thing is, when you look at my record and you look at my history, I have stood up to make sure that we are providing more options for students, not less. That's why I worked with my sister to make sure that there was $1 million last year in the budget to require that all school resource officers go through mandated training, including cultural sensitivity and de-escalation training.
Can I
take care of all of our students.
Because I think, if you are going to provide Mr. Hernandez more time towards the end here, I would hope that we can address your question.
To be fair, there was something, against him. He has a chance to respond. You're up. The question is, should we have some sort of emergency public finance, some sort of emergency relief for undocumented immigrants during this pandemic?
I think we should, and I think we should take or follow California's lead in creating a fund. It's the fair thing to do. The undocumented population in the state of Arizona is not collecting Social Security for a future retirement if they're allowed to stay in this country once we do have comprehensive immigration reform. And so a fund available to them based on perhaps the ITN, as my colleague, my colleague, Mr. Peard, who has been practicing immigration law just like I have for the past 10 years or more, would have it. I think it's the fair thing to do. Well, we're not talking about the Sunnyside School District here. We're talking about a record as a legislator in the state of Arizona, a voting record that reflects what a person is about. And so I would hope that Mr. Hernandez would pronounce the name correctly. It's Mr. Peard. And I would hope that he would discuss his legislative record and not his record as a Sunnyside School District member. You decided to run for the state of Arizona, as we all have. And when we vote for something, our record will speak for itself. So, but with regards to this, this fund, I think it's the appropriate thing to do. But unfortunately, we have a Republican in the administration who's lockstep with President Trump, and unfortunately, anything he does has to be lockstep, it seems to me, with what President Trump is doing. So I would hope that common sense would prevail and that this fund would be created, and that you know, we'll all be on common ground so that we can have a common purpose. Thank you.
Senator Dalessandro?
Of course, I believe they should be getting unemployment or other benefits, because many of them, you know, I've traveled all around the state, and often they're on the front lines of keeping us safe, and we owe them a lot. But there is a not-for-profit organization that I have endorsed. I'm sorry, I don't have the name of it, but I have made donations and encouraged others to do it. And I would like to point out that if someone is undocumented, chances are they don't have health care insurance, and they can go to any community health center, whether it's El Rio in Tucson, Mariposa, or Marana or Community Health, and they serve all people, and they are federally funded, and it's based on your ability to pay. So my thoughts now are with the expected upcoming ruling of the U.S. Supreme Court about DACA students who are I've been on a lot of lucha calls with some of these young people who are, until recently with the COVID pandemic, they've been working, they've been going to school. 95% of them are doing really great. And I always tell any senior citizen, regardless of your political affiliation, you should be thankful to these DACA students, because they're out there working and learning, and they'll take care of us. They'll be making payroll contributions. So my worry is about what the Supreme Court will do, which will be coming up supposedly in the next month.
We've got a couple of Nogales specific questions that I want to get to.
Sorry, Hank, do I not get to answer the actual question other than people?
Oh, did we skip over you? All right, but keep it relatively quick. We're running out of time here. I want to get to a couple more.
Well, again, I think my intentions were questioned in my voting record. That's why I mentioned the $1 million that I worked to secure for training for school resource officers, because that's part of my record, making sure that we're actually getting funding to ensure that our students are being safe in their schools, because my sister wasn't when she was a student. So to the question about whether or not we should be doing more for the undocumented people in our communities, yes. That's why I've been a big supporter of one of my colleagues, Raquel Teran, who, along with a coalition of groups, has helped start the Undocumented Worker Relief Fund. And I've donated personally, and I'm going to help into that to make sure that we're giving direct payments, because we know that right now the state is not doing what it needs to do. And at the federal level, unfortunately, if you are someone who is in a mixed marriage where one person is a citizen and the other person is undocumented, you also don't qualify. So I'm supporting any efforts at the state level. I'm also supporting efforts outside in the private sector and in the nonprofit community to make sure that until the state can take action, we're doing what we need to do to take care of our undocumented community.
Perfect. So on Nogales. Here's a question from the audience. There's quite a bit of backstory here, but I'll sum it up as saying the secondary immigration stop on I-19 just outside of Aravaca, they say the locals have seen an uptick of harassment from the Border Patrol while traveling through that corridor. I realize as a state representative, there's not much you can do about that checkpoint, but I'd like to know what you would like to do about that checkpoint. Your thoughts on that checkpoint. And let's start with Mr. Parra.
Thank you. You know, that checkpoint has been questioned by the locals for such a long time. Folks in Tubac who have struggled to keep their shops open and to create more job opportunities for youth in the Aravaca, the Amado, Tubac area. And that checkpoint obviously has been a difficult thing for a lot of folks there. Harassment or anything along those lines is something that should definitely stop. And I believe that more training is necessary, definitely more training with respect to just humane issues altogether, such as being questioned in a manner that does not, that runs afoul of a person's procedural and substantive due process rights. And I know a thing or two about that. Over the course of the last 20 years, as I've practiced law in Southern Arizona, I've become intimately familiar with not only cross-border issues. I'm a graduate of, I actually took a course on CBP back in 2011, and to become even more intimately familiar with these issues. But I think definitely that's a federal issue, but from the state standpoint, it could be addressed through resolutions. It could be addressed through so many other means. But definitely the folks residing in that area should have more of a say. They're citizens of the United States, and as citizens, they have a voice. And I would hope that that voice, through the efforts of a legislator that's intimately familiar with federal law and immigration law, I intend to have conferences where we can invite Border Patrol, where we can invite U.S. Customs. And in those conferences, residents from the area will be front and center, voicing those concerns and those issues. And I would hope that CBP will also be there along with Border Patrol.
Mr. Peard, how do you feel about this, the checkpoint outside of Aravaca?
Thank you to the questioner. Among the four of us candidates, I believe I'm the only one who has ever taken the Border Patrol to court over this issue, over the checkpoints. In Legislative District 2, we're actually talking about two checkpoints that I know are of concern to local residents. One on Interstate 19, and one that I believe the viewer was asking about on Aravaca Road. Let me be clear. As a state legislator, yes, there is something we can do about it. Yes, it's true that the Border Patrol, a federal agency, administers the checkpoints. But where are the checkpoints located? They are located on state highways. There are 11 checkpoints in the Tucson region, including the two that I just mentioned. And of those, all but one, ironically, the Aravaca checkpoint is located on a state highway. Aravaca is located on a county highway. Nevertheless, that distinction doesn't have a lot of importance, because as a state legislator, on day one, I will introduce legislation instructing the Arizona Department of Transportation to put restrictions on their encumbrance permits. It's called an encumbrance permit, which allows the federal agency to encumber the state-owned highway. And so that any renewal of such encumbrance permits by ADOT have to come with certain restrictions, certain data tracking, so that we know how many US citizens, for example, are being stopped or halted more than a few seconds, things like that. So yes, there is something we can do about it, and I will do it. Day one, I will introduce legislation.
I just add this real quick.
Go ahead.
Based on my background, I will say this much. I've been a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association for the last 10 years, an active participant in conferences and such. And I truly believe that that entity can mediate resolutions such as this. And I would hope that that agency can, or that association rather, will help us in trying to, you know, have those folks understand their rights with respect to those checkpoints, and also have CBP and Border Patrol understand these issues to be dealt with. Thank you.
And Representative?
Looks like we lost Andrea for a second. Again, the checkpoint itself is a federal issue, but I've been a vocal opponent of the checkpoints. I am the darkest person on the debate stage tonight. I have been harassed from when I was 5 years old, going across the border to visit my grandmother, to 2 weeks ago, when I went down to Elgin to pick up hand sanitizer to share with my Democratic colleagues and Republican colleagues at the state house. So for me, knowing that this is a big issue is something that I've been aware of and been a vocal opponent. Even when Congresswoman Gabby Gifford supported the checkpoint when I was an intern, I asked her why, because I have gone through that checkpoint. I've gone through the regular checkpoint and been stopped and harassed and told I don't look like a real American. I've been told that I need to speak better English before I spoke English without an accent. So for me, this is something that's not just an abstract concept. It's something that I've seen when I cross, but it's also something that impacts our business community. When I talk to business owners, particularly those that are involved in produce at the Fresh Produce Association, some of these delays at these checkpoints can mean the difference between them being able to take their goods up to other parts of the state and other parts of the country in one day and in 2 or 3 days because of delays because of border checkpoints. So we need to make sure that we do everything we can to work with our federal partners to get rid of this unnecessary and burdensome checkpoint that's in Arivaca. But I think all of the in-state checkpoints don't really serve the purpose that they were intended 2 years ago. They were supposed to be temporary facilities, and yet they've been permanent fixtures in my life and in the life of many people in Southern Arizona for a very long time.
And good catch, Mr. Peard. Yeah, outside of Tubac on 19 in Arivaca are checkpoints in the district, right? So we have
May I answer?
Oh, there we go. You're back. Okay.
Yeah. Well, my favorite story about the Arivaca checkpoint is the day they stopped Congressman Grijalva, and he wisely just said, please call for a supervisor. Representative Gabaldon has been a victim in Sahuarita, Border Patrol stopping her and being quite disrespectful, asking her if her car was hers or was it stolen. And luckily, a Sahuarita policeman who knew her came to her assistance. But not only have I taken Customs and Border Protection Citizens Academy in Nogales, I've also taken Border Patrol Citizens Academy in both Nogales and Tucson. And I am a firm believer of border security at the border, not at the checkpoints. We've seen that sometimes foreign visitors come and they go south to Tubac and they think they're leaving the United States. So, you know, I support the small businesses there, but I would like to tell the challengers that knowing the Arivaca community as I do, the people are very split there. There are some progressive advocates who hate it, and there are others who swear by it. So it is a challenge, but I believe that we can do reasonable change.
All right. We've almost hit an hour and a half. So let's do a round of closing statements from each of you. And I believe we started with Senator Dalessandro. So let's go in reverse order, starting with Mr. Peard, if you will.
Thank you, Hank. And I'm sorry we didn't get to I imagine everyone's questions. But for those of you watching and did not have your questions answered, I encourage you all to reach out to me. I'm hopeful that although this is a government-sponsored debate tonight, it's the only one under the law. I do hope and encourage there to be more candidate forums in the next 5-6 weeks before voting begins, so that other questions can be answered and aired out, and we can talk through our similarities and our differences. As I hope came across tonight, yes, we are all Democrats. I am confident that we all agree on basic precepts. I am confident that we all agree, for example, that the current occupant of the White House needs to go. I'm confident that we all agree that many things emanating out of Washington on Capitol Hill need to change. I am confident that we all agree that the Republican-controlled state legislature in Phoenix needs to change and needs to be replaced for the first time since 1966 with a Democratic majority, as I think we're all confident and hopeful will happen. However, I hope it's also clear tonight from among all the viewers that there are differences among us Democrats. That just because we have the Democratic label does not mean we are all monolithic and in lockstep with one another. And I hope that all four of us, were able to clarify some of those distinctions and differences tonight. It is one thing to be a deal maker and to reach across the aisle, something I certainly intend to do when and where possible when elected. But it's also important to hold on to your core values, your core principles, to reach certain corporate money when it's not appropriate, to vote against certain policies, though it may be advantageous down the line for some kind of horse trade. Basic principles and we must, as Democrats, hold on to. And if elected, hold on to mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Parra, your closing statements.
Thank you. As a businessman, I realize that we need to support young entrepreneurial innovators. Now more than ever, I think it's important that we support and promote that young talent. Their hunger for change has to be acknowledged. I have a 21-year-old that's just ready to try and get out there and find a job, and it's going to be tough for him post-COVID-19. You know, why am I running? I grew up in an awesome border community. I grew up in Nogales, Arizona. At the age of 14, I was stacking books in the local library. And it was then that I sensed and I understood the power and responsibility of serving others. In 1991, I also felt that calling while serving as a mechanized infantryman in Operation Desert Storm. I'm grateful to our nation and the tenet of equality that it espouses. I believe that Southern Arizona merits more respect and credit than it has otherwise received at the state level. And as a legislator for the state house, I'm going to demand that respect on behalf of Southern Arizona. And I think Southern Arizona is at the crossroads of international trade. And what that means is that we need to keep the international wheels of commerce flowing through our region. And most importantly, though, we need to get woke, and we need to innovate alongside our youth, and as well as alongside our experienced business leaders. You know, I started this debate stating that I think we all need to seek a common sense. We need to act with a common sense and a sense of urgency. We need to all be on common ground with respect to where we go post COVID-19. But most importantly, we have to have a common purpose. And I've been critical of the Ducey administration throughout this debate, and I intend to take him to task when I'm elected as a state legislator, as well as all those Republican legislators in the state house. And when I mean take to task, I mean working with them, reaching across the aisle and working with them. And I understand that in the past that hasn't happened for whatever reason. We don't have the majority, whatever, but it just has not happened. So I would hope that the residents of Southern Arizona, will also get woke with me and vote for me, so that we can improve Southern Arizona altogether. Thank you very much, and thank you to my fellow candidates.
Thank you, Mr. Parra. Representative Hernandez.
Thank you, Hank, and thank you to the Clean Elections Commission for hosting tonight's debate. I think the choice was clear tonight from this debate of, do we want to keep going down the divisive politics of Donald Trump, where all we do is attack each other, or do we want to try and do something to make sure that we're improving our communities? As a gay Latino, I'm used to fighting. And that's what I've been doing for LD2 the entire time I've been at the state capitol. I've not only fought, but I've actually delivered results for our community. Most recently, securing the money to make sure that Green Valley's hospital, the Santa Cruz Valley Regional Hospital, didn't close down, $1 million for Holy Cross and Nogales, fighting to make sure that our students get resources that they need, like school counselors and social workers. I've been a strong proponent of education my entire career, going back to when I started in elected office in 2011. And now, as an elected official at the state level, I'm constantly fighting for those communities that don't have a voice at the Capitol, fighting to ensure that all people are able to work without being fearful of retribution or being fired because of who they are and who they love, by introducing a bipartisan non-discrimination bill, by making sure that I'm fighting for women's rights. That's why I was a women's healthcare champion in 2019, because when Republicans wanted to demand that women say why they're having an abortion, I said, well, one of the things that we need to do is make sure we improve sex education and give access to affordable birth control to make sure we prevent unintended pregnancies. And lastly, standing by our workers. One of the things that wasn't mentioned tonight at all was the ASARCO miners. I've spent tons of time on the line talking to workers, trying to connect them to resources, wrapping Christmas gifts with the Teamsters to make sure that we're taking care of those workers who have been out of work for over 6 months. I stand with the workers in LD2, stand with the workers of Arizona, and I stand with the LGBTQ community, with women, and all of the people that are not represented at the Capitol. I want to keep being your champion, because I've proven time and time again that I'm a fighter that gets results for LD2, and I hope that I'll earn your vote in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Dalessandro.
Thank you so much. You know I love clean elections, and I'm always going to bat for you in Senate Judiciary Committee. As I started out, I stated that I was a proven and experienced progressive leader. Already, I've been endorsed by Arizona List, Sierra Club, Moms Demand Action, Teamsters Local 104, Stonewall Democrats, Free Thought, Equality Fund, Arizona Now, and just yesterday, Arizona Nurses Association. I will be reintroducing a ballot initiative referred by the legislature to get the ERA passed. I know that the two challengers are both one new to Legislative District 2, I've lived here 16 years, and the other new to politics, but I want to point out some things that I've accomplished, my legislative endeavors that were successful in a bipartisan way, because that's the only way a Democrat can get a bill passed. Number one, I have been fighting to keep the Postal Service alive. Cherry Bell Mail Processing Center is in the northern part of Legislative District 2. And first, I had a bill to urge Congress not to close it. That was the first one. And the second one was to restore it to full services. It's not fair to Nogales that their mail has to be there. It has to be in the mailbox by 12 o'clock at the post office. It delays payments to small business. And I want to point out that the establishment of the post office is in the Constitution before amendments to establish post offices and post roads. I think that's a salute to Benjamin Franklin. And it's also, next to the Department of Defense, it's the #1 employer of veterans. So we stop the privatization, and I hope that Congress comes forth with funding for the Postal Service in this time of COVID-19 pandemic. Second thing is I worked collaboratively with Senator Victoria Steele when she was in the House to answer the call for more staffing at the ports of entry. And I got it through the Senate. She got it through the House, but she finished before I did. So it is in her name, but it is for support of staffing for Customs and Border Protection, and to have the line shorter, because those of us who travel frequently to Mexico know about that. Another area, it was mentioned about the wastewater. A couple of years ago, we had a breach on the Santa Cruz County. Sewer covers were opening up and raw sewage was going into the Santa Cruz River. Well, we had the Nogales Wastewater Fairness Act a note to Congress to support that. Now, you might just say, as some people do, that it's only a postcard. Well, I would like to tell you that Ben Lamelli and the group from Nogales government actually went to Washington, D.C. armed with this, and it would have done two things. It would have Nogales only for their sewerage that was being cleaned, and also get more support for the river, because the bridge not only affects Tubac and areas, but the river flows north, so it impacts Tucson. So I was a big activist on that. One thing that doesn't have my name on it, just like Steve Farley for more than a decade sponsored texting while driving, is the removal of the English language learners block of 4 hours for English language. In high school, it makes it nearly impossible to graduate. It's segregation and it's ineffective. I was inspired by the Flores case when I started in 2008, and they were still fighting about it. That bill does not have my name on it, but Representative Fillmore passed it, and I'm often recognized as the person who kept the motivation for going forward. Last year,
Okay, we've got to end it there, Senator. I'm sorry.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. I didn't think I talked as much as the guys disputing.
I was keeping a watch. That went well over the 2 for the intro and outro. Thank you all so much. I'm sorry. I wish I had 100 more questions come in from the audience. I wish we could have gotten to them all. You know, an hour and a half flies. So this is the end of our debate. Thank you so much for the candidates for participating. Thank you to the voters who took the time to watch and inform themselves before the August 4th primary elections. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is your source for nonpartisan voter information. We encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for all your voting needs. And again, thank you to all the candidates putting yourself out there, voters taking the time to watch.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Good night all.